Welcome back to another session. I hope you were well. 2 sessions ago, I started an interaction and a conversation around the central theme of who the individual is. And I said that the quality of your life will be represented and is closely related to the quality of the questions you ask. And in that, I made reference to how I started this segment of the series addressing purpose and what our purpose should be and can be, but more importantly, how to understand and discover that purpose. Purpose deals with the question, why? Today, I want to talk about the question, what? Um, and I want to talk about the question, how? Without purpose, the what and the how has no meaning. But in the session that I covered prior to this one, I also introduced the whole idea of identity into the conversation. Who am I? Because at the core, I find that when I see, address, hear about people who are suffering, there is a crisis of identity. We suffer that not just at the individual level, but as a nation. Great Britain, the Englishman, or the Brits doesn't understand or know who they are. Now, I make a slight subtle um, correction to that. The Englishman is lost, generally speaking. The Welsh and the Scots mostly are still proud and aware of their national identity. Most English men and women struggle because for many years, the whole idea of being an Englishman or being an English woman has become a social stigma. The identity has been robbed of most people, and we have rewritten the history of what took place, and we've made and taught young people to be guilty about their ancestors and their ancestry line, their history, their lineage. Yes, sins were committed, but you take the sins with the good things that were done. The question of identity matters because absent identity, we accept and we pick up the identity that we are influenced into choosing either by environment or association or simply by osmosis. The question about what can I do, which is what I want to address in today's session, is about potential. What potential do you have? Now, when we talk about potential, some of the wisest people, men and women who have ever lived, will tell you that the potential of the individual is infinite. Now, I have always struggled with the whole idea of infinite or infinity because I cannot fathom what it means. I know what 20% means, I know what 100% means because I can quantify it. Infinity cannot be quantified by logic or reason. But we are told that there's something infinite about who we are. Now, I can understand that philosophically from the whole idea that we are spiritual beings and spirit has no boundary or bounds. Is limited only in the physical being by virtue of the body that houses the spirit. But at the spirit, which is our true essence and who we really, really are at the core, there is no limit. The potentiality is without limitation. Now, this is important because what we understand with regards to the life we have here can, you might say, be colored by virtue of the unlimited boundary of possibilities we look up to or the limitations we look down towards. And for most people, especially those who suffer from depression, there seems to be a looking down. And you almost have to teach people to raise your head up because your body follows the direction of your eyes. And so you say, keep your chin up. Because by keeping your chin up, your eyes look towards the heavens or looks towards the high and the mighty and the big, as opposed to looking towards the ground. From dust we come, to dust we will return. Yes, but in the short journey of life, we are called upon to look up and to dream, to believe, to aspire to something greater. Depression is designed by virtue of its negative vibration to cause you to look down. As a matter of fact, what we call depression is simply a resonance, a vibration, an energy state. Absent your understanding of a depression does not negate the presence of depression. Depression is just an energy, a vibration, a frequency. I can get a radio right now and I can turn the dials of the radio, and if I keep turning the dials of the radio, eventually what I will find is that I will get to a station, a frequency that I connect to, and I will hear music. There is music playing in this space. There are people talking in this space. There's interactions. There's country music and pop and jazz being playing in this space. You cannot hear it because you and I are unable right now to tune into that frequency. But if we got a transistor radio or a DAB radio, we can tune into that frequency. And as soon as we tune into the frequency, we can hear the music because we become one with music. You get into the frequency of what you seek, and the frequency that is comes to you, or you are drawn to it. Depression is simply a frequency, a vibration. And for many people, we get stuck because we pursue ourselves in a manner that guarantees that we will arrive along that frequency. And when we get there, we stay there. If you want to avoid being depressed, tune out of the frequency of depression. Make a choice. It starts with a choice. As a matter of fact, I would even go as far as saying you cannot even tune out of depression. You have to look towards the heavens, or you have to look beyond. The mind always moves towards a thought, or it moves away from an existing thought. If you want to get out of depression, you cannot solve your depression at the same level that created it. So what you must do is look to a frequency higher, which is looking up, and keep your gaze on that frequency. And you will find by keeping your gaze on that frequency, you will be elevated away from the depression frequency into the abundant frequency. A lot of people are trying to cure depression by elbow grease, by being tough, by hard work, by focus, by dedication. And that is not how you solve depression. It is not how you solve anxiety. The first step is simply tune out. How? Turn the dial and go up. Look up. Now, in today's session, I want to talk about potential. What you're here to do and what you can do. There is a certain group of people who believe that some of their suffering is bound in the limitations placed on them by something that they lack or something that they are unable to achieve. Again, I start with the whole question, who are you? It's possible to be a successful failure. In other words, a fish swims in water, is in its natural environment, is doing what it was created to do. There is no effort, there is no energy wasted. Why? Because the fish is designed to do what it is doing in water. Now, this is where environment comes in. A fish and its potential is limited by the environment to which it is located. Same fish, I put the same fish in air and it dies. You take a baby shark and you put it in an aquarium and it's limited by the size of the aquarium. You remove it from the aquarium, you put it back in the sea, and that limitation disappears. Environment limits our potential. And for many people, to cure your depression, sometimes you don't even have to do much. You just have to change environment. And that environment starts with you tune out and you tune up to a better frequency, but then you change your physical location sometimes, and you change your mind. You renew your mind. Now, faith comes by hearing, and fear comes by hearing and hearing. Faith leaves by what you hear, and fear leaves by what you hear. Both words start with the word or the letter F. Faith, fear. They're polar opposites, they're opposite to each other, but just as powerful as each other. You see, one of the fascinating things people don't understand is the mind does not discriminate. The mind just is. It takes your fear and it multiplies your fear and it gives you something more powerful. Or it takes your faith and it multiplies your faith and it gives you something more powerful. The same energy that is used to create fear and anxiety can be channeled towards faith and abundance and growth and well-being. But your potential as an individual is limited by the story you tell yourself. Hence, if you think about some of the most influential people we know, but also people who are not as influential but have lived a great life or who we admire, you find that there's a story they tell themselves. That story might be a story which simply says something like, this too will pass, this too shall pass, and therefore they are not limited by events that occur in the now because they believe it's come to pass. It hasn't come to stay. Some other people are bound by perhaps an understanding that good things are supposed to happen to them. And therefore, when they go through negative things, they simply say, this too shall pass. Their potential, therefore, is linked to the story they tell themselves. They understand who they are, they understand why they're here, and therefore they can deal with the questions and the challenges life throws at them with regards to potentiality and what they do every day. I know it is difficult and life can be hard, and sometimes your efforts are not rewarded at the time you want it to be rewarded, and that can get you going into a cycle of concern and worry and feeling that something is not just. Let me leave you with, as I bring today's session perhaps to its rightful conclusion, let me leave you with the following saying. There is a season to sow, there is a season to reap. You cannot do both in the same season, and you cannot do both in the same soil. I would even go as far as saying you cannot do the same both at the same time. Sometimes you sow, but you never reap from where you sow. You reap from a different harvest, sometimes in a different location. And I think for some people who have actually suffered from depression, there's a sense that they feel an unjust world that does not reward them for their efforts. Your mother is never happy with what you do, so you feel disenfranchised in the family. Your father is never available or is not alive. Your boss doesn't reward or acknowledge your hard work. The society doesn't look at you for inspiration. There's always something. If it's not one thing, it's another. And it starts to create or breed this resentment, this negative energy of not being happy. And sadly, you tune down into depression and you stay there. And all I'm saying in today's session is that we have a potential that is unlimited. It's only limited in many ways by the limits we place on ourselves. Yes, we have ontological limitations, but for most of us, our limitations are not biological or ontological. They're self-created. They're imposed on ourselves. Sometimes imposed at birth and during our early childhood, based on what we hear and see and what we are told about ourselves. You have to make the effort to say, do you know what, I let go, I get rid of all of these limitations, and I choose a potential going forward that is more abundant. I can do all things, as the great scriptures will say, through Christ who strengthens me. In other words, I can do anything I want to do. And that anything should include, and should always include, and I can get through my suffering. Now, one of the things we were promised in this life is suffering, directly or indirectly. That's what's guaranteed. You know, we talk about death and taxes, but no one really, I hate to use the word, no one really experiences death, because that's the end. You know, we don't die and then come back the next second and say, well, now I've actually experienced what death is like. We die and we can't actually carry on. But we do experience suffering, because some of us, we lose loved ones, we lose a job, we get injured, we have physical ailments, and we have to live with those every day. So there is an element of suffering that actually is baked into the picture of life. We have to, and this is a good point to make to parents, we have to learn and we have to prepare for the inevitability of suffering. And this is partly why in the West we struggle the most, because we've conditioned the younger people to think that life is supposed to be all about happiness and joy and prosperity and hedonistic pleasures, and there is no suffering. And at the first sign of resistance, people panic, people default to worry, people default to anxiety and depression. Your potential is unlimited. What can you do? Should have something that follows that question, which is, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me or you. But in addition to that, there has to be an understanding and an acceptance that by asking that question, even in the midst of your depression, you have to accept an answer with a word or a few words to say something. So you're depressed, you're anxious, you're worried, you've decided the way is out. Just ask yourself a simple question. What can I do? Is there something I can do? And the answer has to be yes. Now that is where hope begins. The idea that there is something, there's a possibility you don't know or understand yet. And you need not know, because absent that uncertainty would not require hope, because you would have certainty. Uncertainty or surprises is what gives life all of those colors. The idea that you walk out of the door and you cannot tell yourself exactly what will happen on a minute-by-minute basis means that you actually embrace the uncertain and the future with trepidation, controlled, however, but with optimism, expressed, ideally. Now, I hope today's session has been useful.